Welcome back to the Aspire to Lead podcast and Happy New Year to you. Today's episode is extra special because it features three incredible guests who are reimagining what it means to care for the whole educator and the whole child. Heather Lageman is a life and engagement coach, administrator, and longtime English teacher who has devoted her career to building communities of courageous, values-driven educators and designing learning that feels human, not scripted. Dr. Leigh Alley is a leadership instructional strategist and first-generational college graduate who has served as coordinator of teacher education at the University of Maine at Augusta, where she's created the first Masters of Arts in Teaching focused on whole child education and co-designing the xSELeratED school framework, which we're going to talk a lot about during this episode. And to round out our panel is Walter McKenzie, who has been on the Aspire to Lead podcast before. He's the founder of The Worthy Educator, an international known presenter and author who brings decades of experience as a classroom teacher, district leader, and national professional learning designer, all centered on the power of relationships, community, and lasting impact in schools. Now, the reason we brought all three of them together is they've constructed a beautiful book that we're going to talk about in more detail. So stay with us as we're talking about social emotional learning and their beautiful school framework that is being utilized all over this country. Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together.
All right, welcome back to Aspire to Lead. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season as we are wrapping up and getting to the new year. And I have three amazing folks with a brand new book. I'm going to throw it up for those who are watching on YouTube. We've got School Seasons xSELeratED, and we're going to talk about this wonderful resource that I've had an opportunity to read and look through. And I'm just so excited for my three guests. We've got Walter, Leigh, and Heather with us, the three authors of this fabulous resource. And I just want to thank you guys for being here on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, it's been a while since I've had three other folks on at the same time. So this is going to be fun. We're going to do kind of a roundtable discussion and we'll try and facilitate. So Walter, you've been on the podcast before. And so folks hopefully have had an opportunity to listen to that episode and kind of hear your backstory. But real quick, if they missed that episode, will you just share a little bit about yourself, your educational leadership background?
Sure. Lifelong educator, retired about 1.5 years ago, launched The Worthy Educator, loving life, and love being here with these two wonderful people and looking forward to the conversation.
That's awesome. I'm super excited to connect with these awesome authors also. So Leigh, will you please share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Like Walter, I'm a lifelong educator, career-long educator, 2 decades deep now. Started in the high school English classroom back at my own alma mater and then moved on to literacy and instructional strategy for our region's Consortium for School Improvement. I think of myself as sort of the quintessential school kid. School rescued me in many ways. I grew up sort of painfully poor in down East Maine and saw firsthand that education is a leveler of opportunity, and that really spurred my interest in whole child education. I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks for having us, Joshua.
Yeah, pleasure and honor. All right, Heather, let's hear about your story.
Oh, thank you. And similar to Leigh, I think that's one of the reasons why we're kindred spirits. I started in the education teaching in the same high school that I attended. So also a lifelong educator coming up on 28 years and just love learning, love connecting, as you'll see from the book, things like that. And really figuring out how to bring out the brilliance in others, being that connector, that behind the scenes person who's just helping great things happen through collaboration and everyone seeing really how much they have to give and what a great gift they are in the world. That's been my calling and my mission in life. So excited to be here and get to share a little bit about the joy of this collaboration because this has been really amazing.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear about the collaboration. So Walter, I'm going to throw it to you first because you were on and you talked about The Worthy Educator. And I know this book is published through Worthy Educator Publishing. So will you just share a little bit about how you got connected with these two amazing women and the collaboration that continued through this book?
Well, I've been working separately with Leigh and Heather for years, and Leigh doing wonderful work up at the University of Maine at Augusta, leading an ASCD affiliate for Maine. Heather in Baltimore County Public Schools and serving as a leader on the Maryland ASCD affiliate. And having said that and knowing how awesome they were, we were all just kind of bopping along in our own lanes. And about a year ago, they came to me and they were like, we'd like to do something on The Worthy Educator around social emotional learning, and they had it all detailed out. And I was like, why hadn't I ever thought to introduce these people, and why are they coming to me? So when they did, we started xSELeratED a year ago in November, so it's been a year, and we post monthly features on a dedicated site on theworthyeducator.com for those reflections on adult SEL and self-care and well-being. And then I'm going to leave it to Leigh and Heather to talk about the book concept and how that kind of evolved from that and where we are now.
I'm happy to jump in. Walter did a great job encapsulating how it began. I think the interesting thing is Walter, in a roundabout way, did really bring us together. We had hosted an incubator a year and a half or more ago, talking about reclaiming the mantle of social emotional learning, because social emotional learning sort of gets conflated with other sort of politically charged concepts sometimes. And it's important that we talk about what social emotional learning is. So that was really something that ignited our joint passion. We love working together. I loved being part of that conversation with Heather. I think that we had so many affinities, and she started to sort of point out some of those, but we really were thinking about, the need to leverage this kind of conversation and to spread this kind of mission to schools everywhere. And so the book sort of came about as a natural outgrowth from the sort of monthly blogging we were doing. I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about the seasonal structure of the text later in the conversation, but we were putting out sort of seasonal supports for teachers, taking a very adult first approach for how you then cultivate social emotional learning competency in learners. And it has to start in the adults first. We're all sort of healing from something if we think about, what it means to bring your whole self to the work. And so then we realized that we really could reach people on a deeper level, give them more of a map for the seasons for how you make the work just fit with the way you do school and life. Because, if there were a silver bullet in education, it is that trusting relationship. And we felt like given our careers and the paths they had taken, we might be able to be that trusted voice.
Heather, do you want to add anything, or do you want me to dive into the book? Because she did say something that I keyed in on that I want to talk about.
Oh, well, then feel free, because I definitely captured it.
Perfect. All right. So Leigh did a wonderful job, and she was talking about what was built around kind of teaching with the season component. And so I want to talk about that more, about how schools can think about SEL, maybe culture and instruction across an entire year. Like, what's that framework look like in the book?
I think that kind of comes from what Leigh was just saying, is really thinking about how can we give some supports for a roadmap for your own personal growth and development, as well as that of your students and staff, in manageable and organized chunks, so that people can certainly, like we've said in the book, use it modularly, pull things apart. It doesn't have to be, if you think that something in January would fit better in August, that's absolutely fine. But that we've organized it in a way that hopefully it's palatable for when you're planning your year, and also when you're just jumping into, oh my goodness, I need to do something right now. I'm having this concern or this celebration that I want to bring about in my school or my classroom. What do I do now? And that way you have a resource that can fit your needs any time of the year or season. And that's where we sort of came up with that concept. And also with the through line that we have of growth and development and cultivation, and thinking about things seasonally there, and how the actual seasons in the world mirror seasons in a school system.
Walter, you talked about the framework that exists in the book as far as the xSELeratED Schools framework. So we just share what that looks like for folks so they can kind of get an understanding of what the resource looks like.
Yes, we just released, and again, I'm going to defer to my two colleagues, we just released the framework as a second publication through the Worthy Educator Press. School Seasons xSELeratED was our first title, so proud of that. And the framework provides an adaptable way of thinking about SEL supports for adults across our careers and in every facet of our lives. And I'm going to ask Heather and Leigh to talk more about that. But the framework now was actually established before the book, and now that it's published, it's going to be the focal point for our work moving forward. So Heather and Leigh, please jump in.
Yeah, I think that you said it beautifully, Walter. It's interesting how life takes you where it will, right? And so we just had a conversation broadly about publishing through the Worthy Educator platform last summer, because there are so many voices. And you know what? I'm not trying to tell tales out of school, but I am a writer. And what I'm experiencing in the publishing world is that it's like huge names attached to publishing houses, and that's how stories get told. But maybe Heather can vouch, as I can, So many times in the high school English classroom, you would ask folks to share, and there were different levels of comfortability with that, but it became clear that everyone had a story. It's just a matter of polishing up that story. And I love that Walter has really been committed and passionate about letting stories shine, letting teachers lead, because we really believe the wisdom is in the room. It's not down the hall. It's not in someone else's space. It's not in the broader world. It's also right here. And Walter does a great job of capturing that, not only on the Worthy Educators site, platform, and with that mission, but in this publishing realm too. So we had imagined the framework sort of existing behind a member wall, that we would sort of grow a community of folks who were dedicated to this sort of learning and then make these tools available. Then School Seasons xSELeratED was published, and we thought, well, we need to take it where folks are. And so it became available through Ingram and to booksellers everywhere, and Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of the places. But really, I think that the power of the framework itself lies in its very approachable framing. So understanding ourselves and others, nurturing ourselves and others, and through that work, coming to build a better world, really is much more approachable than terms that you can't sort of throw out off the cuff, and competencies that feel like a sort of onerous lift to grow. We're talking about the way that you want and cultivate good things for yourself and other people in the realm of our ability every moment right now. And Heather said something when she was sharing about the structure of the book that I thought was brilliant, which is another of the ways that we approach the work is by offering lots of different tools that might be right for you right now, or maybe not right now. Readiness matters. So it's sort of a plug and play, choose your own adventure, in that we're offering different ways you can arrive at this same end goal. You choose the pathway forward that fits your context right now, and also fits the bandwidth that matters to educators.
And I think it's so important is that sense of identity. And we really are looking at how do we create that space for everyone to explore their identities and make space and celebrate others. And that's why it's important, like Leigh was just highlighting, for people to be able to pick it up where they are and use it in different ways, because we want it to be respectful of the fact that there's so many different personalities, perspectives, identities, stories out there, and that there's often not a space to tell them. It was funny, if I'm allowed a little bird walk, I was on a call the other day with a customer service person helping me with something. And one of the things I always try to do is get to know them a little bit in order to just, make their day a little brighter. It's got to be tough to be answering calls when you're on hold for an hour, things like that. And one of the things that she shared was that her son was working on storytelling and writing a book. And so it started the whole conversation. It's sort of, if you're open to the energy that the world is bringing to you and how you can help others. So I shared information about Worthy. He's a high school student, shared information about Ingram, and that's going to be one of her gifts to him for the holiday that doesn't have to cost her a lot and is going to help him have his voice out there in the world and have a sense of connection and belonging. And so I think that's what our trio here is all about, is through this book and through so many other things. I get a little misty, but really creating those spaces and those opportunities, because we have many things to put out there, but we know there's so much more. And so that's why there's going to be some sequels and some additional work, because we want feedback from those who are using it to say, hey, here are some additional ideas I have that we can add to things. Also, maybe here's another direction we'd like you to explore. Can we join you on that journey?
Yeah, I love it. So Heather, I'm going to stick with you. So you had talked about those tools, right? And obviously there's a lot of different schools, states, things that are very vastly different between each campus, as we all know. So can you share maybe one concrete example of a tool that's in the book that folks can use today or tomorrow to strengthen the learning, support relationships, or classroom management?
Sure. One of the things that's fun is, since I had the January chapter, we're really timely here, so we can kind of pick from the different months and things like that. So Walter can do a December one, but for January, I love really rethinking how we think about the new year and that transition. And so one of the activities that I love in there is just looking at what's working. It's called the What's Working celebration circle, and really thinking about, instead of I want to change something about myself, or I'm going to have all these resolutions that we know not everybody keeps. Instead, let's think about, as a school community, as a classroom community, what's working. Let's celebrate. What do we want to take from 2025 into 2026? And then you can also think about other things, but to really focus on the fact that there's a lot going right. And I think we often don't pause to do that, and that's one of the things that the beauty of this trio is. I feel like we do such an amazing job with each other of really just celebrating the ideas that we have, and we have created a space, and we often say this to one another, where I can take feedback that's like, oh, whoa, Heather, you missed the mark on that one. That's just way out of alignment, not going to work. And I don't take it as a personal identity issue. I don't take it personally. And so that's where I think the more that we can foster those kinds of environments where the focus is on celebration and on the joy in learning, and how do we make each other better by giving each other sometimes hard feedback, having courageous conversations, but having it be grounded in that celebration of what works well, and how do we build upon that for positive energy and change.
Walter, do you want to share about December?
So I was thinking, as Heather was sharing, looking across all the chapters, there are just so many opportunities, whether it's a tool, such as a reflection tool or a rubric or a guide, or whether it's an exercise that you can just go in the next day and do with your staff, where people get to share or debrief or connect in a different way outside of our normal roles. Some of the activities that I thought were the most touching in the work were the ones where we were providing closure, whether it's the end of a school year or the leaving of a staff member or a loss that a faculty can experience in the course of a school year. And, we just don't make enough time for that. And when these things suddenly, imminently are sitting right in front of us, we scramble. We're trying to figure out how are we going to respond to this. And what I love about this book is things are there for you. You don't have to scramble. And the more you get into it, I want to believe it lures you in. And pretty soon you're starting to live these things. And it's starting to shift the way you view things in the course of your school year. So that no matter what the tool is, no matter what their activity is, you feel like we're your constant companion. We're there. And you're never alone. And so SEL doesn't seem so daunting. It doesn't seem like something extra on your plate. It's something you start incorporating and living every day.
To add to that, I just would say, I think one of the strengths of the text, Joshua, is the way that it honors the rhythms of what it means to do school, and the way it honors the rhythms of the people who do school, whether it's students or it's teachers who are leaders or administrators, etc., all of the support staff, all of them. I think one of the challenges and one of the places where I felt the most burnout as an educator was when we started driving toward that very high stakes standardized testing, and lost was sort of that favorite thematic unit that a teacher might have done. Like, I remember the Johnny Appleseed unit from my first grade year. I will never forget it. But I think Walter and Heather both started to touch on just the way that we honor rhythms. We're meant to live with seasons. We're meant to have ritual and routine. We're meant to have those closure moments that Walter was talking about. We're meant to cultivate our sense as leaders, and the compassion and the care and all of the things that they spoke to. I think another piece I love about the book is the focus on a spirit of inquiry, not having to have all of the answers, not having to have it all figured out. And so one of the tools I love the most is called the Wonder Wall, and it just is honoring that very thing. Getting curious helps us to get into, the most difficult to grapple with aspects of teaching and learning. And I love that the book honors that. I also love the transformative leadership lens that carries through each of the chapters, understanding that transformative leaders are teachers, that it's grassroots, that we don't have to have the permission of a central office to make change today, and that the most meaningful change comes in the way that Walter and Heather spoke about. It's about the rhythms, the people, and not being able to check parts of ourselves at a classroom door.
I got a follow-up for that. So, Leigh, if you want to take it and then pass it off, you sure can. But you mentioned it, and Walter mentioned something too. You talked about SEL and how sometimes it's viewed in a negative lens, depending on where you are. And you talked about the politics of that. We don't need to get into that component, but it's not new, right? It's been around for 30 years. I mean, it's something that's important, but over time, sometimes there's a stigmatization to that word and a misunderstanding of what it truly means, right? And so we might see, as far as our leaders, some disengagement or resistance toward it. So for our leaders who are listening, what can this resource do to help them through that, to not only see growth as far as our teachers, but the impact on the campus and with our students?
That's a brilliant question, Josh. I really feel like, without getting into the political murkiness of anything, and it doesn't matter sort of, where you're voting from, what your perspective is, I think there's a concern that education like this might be indoctrination, that it might be really values-based, and that values might not be shared across various ways of thinking. But it isn't that, except to say social emotional learning honors the values of what it means to be in community with each other. And one of the reasons I love the text is because, no matter what your, ideation might be, no matter what way you might lean when you're voting, when you come to a text like this, there's nothing to take issue with. There's nothing that should make us in any way hesitant to think about what it means to build community and tools for building community. And that's what the book does. And if we think about the purpose of schools, communities don't exist in service to schools. Schools exist in service to communities. And so we're thinking about ways we make everyone stronger. And I think that that's a real strength of the book. I think another piece of that is that all of us want to arrive at outcomes like these, but we think that there has to be some, one of the realms I like to write in is just the problem with hierarchies, and all of the ways that we think about school are sort of arranged according to hierarchy. There's no right or wrong place to dive into the work. There's no one better competency to begin. It's all interconnected and cyclical. We're going to revisit it through recursion over time. And so the best place to begin is where you are. And I think that that's what I really like about the book, and what they'll find in answer to your question, Josh, is that begin where you are is the fabric, it's the weave.
I think that definitely hits upon the importance of shared humanity. And that's one of the things that's the underpinning of what Leigh was just sharing, is that in this world today, it's a universal belief that we have our shared humanity. And if we don't capitalize on that, we're really missing out. And the value add of recognizing that, building upon it, and giving people tools to first really look deeply inside themselves so that they can be in community, authentically in community. And that's something that can be seen as sort of something you can skip, a nice to have, not a need to have. And to your question about what to say to leaders, I think we would all argue that that's essential, that that's the foundation to good leadership, is to getting to know those you're working with, those you're collaborating with, so that you can bring out their collective brilliance, so that you can also help them, with some of the activities like Walter was sharing, when there's a loss, when there's something that needs to be discussed, instead of, it's not something you sweep under the rug, it's something that you create that family, that community within your school, so that everyone is working towards the same goal, that they've contributed to it, they're a part of it, and they really feel that sense of accomplishment and belonging that is going to be something that's also going to keep people in the system that they're working in the school that they're working in, because of that commitment. And that's something I know a lot of folks are worried about right now. And that's one of the things we hope this book will help bring leaders the tools to make sure that they are really building that capacity within their school teams, and then helping them stay and grow right where they are.
Walter, I'm going to throw it to you because I kind of jumped the gun with the framework because I got so excited. But I know there's a book number 2 coming out. So will you share just a little bit more about that, what people can expect, when is it dropping? I mean, any other information would be fantastic.
Yeah, the book is out. We got ahead of ourselves. Well, first of all, the first book came out right on schedule. I don't think between the three of us, we've ever been involved in anything in education that's right on schedule. So we're very proud of ourselves for that. And then within a month, we turned around and Leigh was working her genius in the background. And next thing we know, she said, I think we're ready to get the framework out there. And bam, before Thanksgiving, we got it out. And it's at theworthyeducator.com/XFF for Accelerated Schools Framework. And you'll find that if you love School Seasons Accelerated with its monthly themes, and you're hungry for that kind of structure that you can apply to everything you're doing and make it your own, that the framework is the perfect follow-up companion. We're also talking just getting down in the weeds and forecasting a little. We're talking about doing a School Seasons Accelerated for students as a logical next step. And that knowing the three of us, when we hit the ground running, it's going to come flying off the press in no time. But no pressure. But these two are just amazing. I mean, I was sitting there pumping away at the Worthy Educator, hadn't even had a thought about book publishing. And with these two amazing, energizing people, it happened. Like Leigh said, it started this summer, and here we are 6 months later. So it's just a wonderful team.
Well, that's incredibly impressive. I didn't realize the book was already out. So kudos to all three of you. That's insane how fast you pumped that out. So I'll make sure that I have that in the show notes also for folks. But Leigh, do you want to talk about the potential of School Seasons xSELeratED for students and what kind of that thought process is?
Sure. I thought that might be where you were leading with that question, the what's next, Josh. I'd love to. I also just want to circle back to what Walter was sharing just about publishing and the timeline. And suddenly here we are. And Heather was talking about the way the universe leads when you're willing or whatever. But I think part of the beauty of this particular press, and I love working with Heather and Walter in it, is that it's nice to be free enough to tell the truth about education. And I mean the experience of every educator, and not to say the experience is universal, but who better to share the reality of what's happening in schools than school leaders who are teachers, who are ed techs, who know deeply the needs of learners. And also, by the way, I just don't think that you can create a solution for any challenge that doesn't utilize the expertise and collective wisdom of the people closest to that. So the idea that we're trying to give voice to sort of an every teacher experience, I think is powerful. We want to see decisions regarding our work reflecting our voices. And that's something that Walter's achieving through the press. And I'm proud to be part of that. In terms of a school season's accelerated student text, I think, you'll see, especially as you dive in more with the book over time, that we are taking that adult first approach. We're practicing sort of routines, protocols. Walter talked about tools and strategies that are sort of adult first, but you can carry them straight back to classroom as it is. It's probably a 60-40 split on what would really be usable in that text for students, because it's not all what happens in a teacher's room. It's how you build community together. It's how you honor those seasons and put those sort of loving, end caps, footnotes on the various experiences of school, as Walter was speaking about. But the text we imagine next really takes those same seasons, those same topics that sort of frame the book for teachers and moves them into the student's lens. So now that we've grappled as adults, how do we help students to grapple with, Walter was talking about, endings. What does it mean to say goodbye to each other at the end of the year? What does it mean to love ourselves and others well in February? What does it mean to begin again softly in January? Because January does bring a new beginning and a new opportunity. It is a new year for so many reasons, just as September is a new year, obviously, for educators. But really helping students to be in community with each other in kid-centric language that helps them also be in the driver's seat of the social emotional learning experience. Heather was speaking brilliantly to how all learning really is social and emotional. And there might be some who want to tease out that emotional intelligence quotient from an IQ, but we know through work like Goleman and others that the more powerful predictor of future success is emotional intelligence. And so cultivating it purposely and purposefully while we have the opportunity by being a mentor and helping learners to mentor each other is powerful. Near peer mentorship is the most powerful mentorship. So I think that we all agree if we can better involve students in their learning in these domains, then they grow better together.
I love that, Leigh. I mean, that really just encapsulates all that we're about, that whole space that when you think about it, like you're saying, coaching questions, and we've got lots of reflective and coaching questions in there, are so helpful because you can use them often for, as adults and then extrapolate to students, but we wanted to customize too. So that also, to your point about the mentoring, that students would be seeing the adults modeling the same behavior, having the same questions, being able to share their stories and their journeys from experiencing activities within our text. And so that's what we're hoping will be that through line, is that it can really build that community so that as the adults in the building are helping prepare students, to be their best selves as they travel through the journey of their lives, that they can see and they'll have role models. Like we all look back on teachers who impacted us and that we're still in touch with, and that we send those thank yous. We have activities like that. You send a thank you to someone who impacted you and supported you along the way. That we just hope to build more moments for that and more spaces and opportunities for those connections, so that that can be a sort of a lifelong legacy, what we're doing in these book series.
Heather, is there any additional resources out there? I mean, obviously we've talked about the different texts, but is there any additional resources that you're either building out in the future or have available for folks if they're looking for more information in regards to the topic of SEL?
I think just the student one is what we're working on right now from this trio of friends. So, And who knows, the sky's the limit. So that's one of the things we'd love for you to ask your listeners. That's part of what all this is about, is like Leigh and Walter were saying, the wisdom's in the room, and we mean the room of the schoolhouse, not just this Zoom room. And so really, have people provide examples and ideas of things that they would like to have us percolate on. We would love that.
Well, let's ask them, right? I mean, if you have anything, you can jump in the comments on Spotify or on YouTube, and we'll make sure that we get that information to Walter and the crew here for any additional resources. Leigh, you look like you were about to say something. So
yeah, I was just going to tag in on what Heather just shared, because Heather's not speaking about some of the things that we've talked about doing. And so one of the things that we'd love for your listeners to give some feedback about, and that I know Heather's been thinking about quite a bit, is just organizational partners. What do they need? And thought leadership that can come to them. And so to answer your question, Josh, the next might not be another text right now. It might be that consulting piece. It might be, growing some sort of network, which we had thought would be that original sort of member wall piece that would bring us together under the banner of social emotional learning or something like that. But I think you'll see some diverse tools. And I think at some point we'll get to maybe some classroom. I'm not a big fan of a classroom off-the-shelf program resource. However, I am aware that it's helpful to have something when we have a long-term substitute or some things like that keep the conversation moving, because it always has to be moving forward.
As we wind down our conversation, I'd love for you guys just to share one item that you think people can start with in regards to SEL. Obviously, we're starting a new semester around the country. And so if they're looking to maybe encapsulate some of the things that we're talking about, what would be one thing that you would recommend for them to start with? So Walter, do you mind kicking us off for that?
I'll take an easy answer. Self-care. I think that we're such givers in education, and it's such a service profession, that you'll find throughout the book this thread of self-care. And we start with ourselves, and even in the harried holiday season, and definitely in the new year, being able to put ourselves first, draw boundaries, say no, and follow through on the things that feed our souls and keep us in the profession for the reasons we started in the profession. That's good stuff.
I'm happy to go next. I think for so many, social emotional learning remains a hidden curriculum, and it can't be. It has to be explicit. We have to teach it. We have to do that as purposefully as we teach anything else and not leave it to chance. But as we do that, I think that we have to understand that, SEL work is messy like any other important learning, and norming and renorming are very important. We have to have the conversations. We have to do the mentorship, the scaffolding piece. We're not all going to show up ready to do our best SEL work or be our best SEL self every day. So the importance of having the conversation again, reminding our community the way we have promised to be in community with each other and holding each other to those standards. And so one of the resources that I just had put out through our monthly blog not long ago was an October renorm for that purpose, reminding us who we want to be in community with each other, allowing ourselves the reinvention, the learning, the messiness, the humanity Heather talked about. I think that is a huge gift.
Yeah, and along those lines, I think it's similar to some of the things we've been putting out on our blog series as well, Leigh, is that right now that whole concept of rest and taking the time in a time when it's super busy and to really just pause. And that sounds a little hokey to people sometimes, but the fact that if we are not giving ourselves time to pause and we're modeling that, what message does that send? And what level of energy that's not really positive does that send out into those that we're interacting with, right? So one of the things that has really stuck with me is thinking about the fact that it is not a badge of honor to be overworked, to not sleep, to brag about things that you're doing too much of and that you're shortchanging those that you love and your immediate family and your friend group, as well as your coworkers, right? Because you're going to go, do. And so we want to model the fact that I would encourage folks at this time of year to just take that pause, take that moment to give yourself the permission slip to just sit quietly with a cup of tea or coffee, whatever's your favorite beverage, and really think about, where am I spending my time? Where am I investing? And where do I want to be investing? And not with a sense of judgment, just a sense of, okay, where are some micro moves, some places we can change to make sure that we are living the life that we want to live and modeling that for others so that everyone can be their whole selves and bring their whole selves to every environment that we're in.
I love the micro moves. All right. We're going to take little baby steps as we go through the rest of the school year. So let's talk about where people can connect with you. I've been flashing up the website worthyeducator.com/SSX for School Seasons Accelerated, but is there any other place that you would like folks to go, either via website or social media? Walter, we'll again start with you and we'll just kind of circle around.
Yeah, we've been trying to develop our social media presence. So certainly Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we've been moving into Blue Sky. And the worthyeducator.com/press will continue to feature as we continue to produce new content. Probably the one address we haven't put in was worthyeducator.com/xSELeratED, xSELeratED. And that's where we do our monthly features, so we're always fresh and timely. But Leigh and Heather, what do you think? Are there other URLs or places you want to mention?
For me personally, I write for children and adults, and so Shiny Friends Super Squad is my social emotional learning series for middle grade readers. At Leigh Alley on Instagram is the best way to reach me. Instagram is still Bookstagram, and that's my favorite place to be. So that's an additional way to connect with me.
Love that. Yeah, I think definitely what Walter has shared about all the Worthy Educator platforms, and you can see in my bio some of the other places that I like to write. The English teacher has not left me, so just lots of places I like to get things out there, and love to hear more ideas to share on some of these articles and things like that about how can we spotlight and champion the great things that are happening out there.
Awesome. Well, I'll have all of these links in the show notes, also on joshsample.com. So make sure that you are connecting with this amazing group of educators, leaders, authors, support folks. I mean, you guys are doing it all. So it's just a pleasure to get to know you even further, hear about all the wonderful resources that are going on. Walter, thank you again for coming back. I hope everyone that's listening, if you haven't listened to that previous episode, that you go back and listen to Walter and hear what he's doing with the Worthy Educator, because that is a whole initiative that's occurring right now. That is brilliant, and I'm so glad that, Walter, you've connected with two amazing women. So, Walter, Heather, Leigh, thank you so much for being on Aspire Lead. I'm so excited to see how this program explodes across the country.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.